to the top. Okay, I'm ready in 5, 4, 3. Good morning. I am Kenyon McDuffie, Councilman for Ward 5 and Chair of the Council's Committee on Business and Economic Development. Today's Thursday, July 1st, 2021, and we are convening this meeting virtually via Zoom. The time is 11:35 a.m. I'm calling to order this additional meeting of the committee. For the record, I'd like to note that we have a full quorum consisting of Ward 2 Councilmember Brooke Pinto, Ward 3 Councilmember Mary Che, Ward 6 Councilmember Charles Allen, and Ward 7 Councilmember Vincent Gray, and myself. Today we have one measure before the committee for consideration, which is the report and recommendations of the Committee on Business and Economic Development on fiscal year 2022 budget for agencies under its purview. The committee is marking up its budget report for the second time under pandemic conditions. We convened last year's budget process in the shadow of a global pandemic that ravaged our nation and upended the lives of residents across the district. Since the first case of the virus was detected in the United States in January of 2020, the coronavirus has infected almost 33.5 million and killed over 601,000 Americans. At home here in the district, the disease has ravaged communities and killed 1,141 Washingtonians, 76% of whom were Black. In addition to the cost on life and health that we've suffered, COVID-19 has also devastated our local economy with an estimated 250 brick and mortar businesses having closed permanently and more than 100 others temporarily shuttered. Unsurprisingly, systemic racism and economic security, which predate this pandemic, have exacerbated the adverse impacts of COVID-19 on Black and brown residents, as well as Black-owned and Latinx-owned businesses. This is especially the case for individuals and families with less resources, as they have been at the greater risk of exposure to both the health and economic consequences of COVID-19. As a result, they have faced higher rates of infection, hospitalization, and death, as well as higher rates of unemployment and lack of access to necessities like food, housing, and healthcare. And similarly, Black and brown entrepreneurs have suffered disproportionately. In fact, a study by McKinsey & Company found that while all small business owners face challenges during COVID-19, those with limited financial assets were more at risk. And for this reason, not having accumulated wealth meant Black small business owners were some of the most vulnerable. On June 11th of this year, the mayor eliminated most COVID-19 public health emergency restrictions, and the district has been slowly moving toward recovery. However, the disparate effect of COVID-19 on families and communities of color still persists. Thus, the committee closely scrutinized the mayor's proposed budget to ensure that budget allocations, including the unprecedented federal support the district received, were targeted to make transformational investments across our economy, especially in communities that were underserved prior to the pandemic. One of the primary objectives of the committee this year was to ensure that the business and economic development budget reflects smart investments that, as we recover from this devastating pandemic, will help chip away at the district's racial wealth gap, make our workers and businesses stronger, and ensure that the future economic growth of our city is more inclusive. The report and recommendations of the Committee on Business and Economic Development for FY22 were developed over months of public and stakeholder engagement and research. Fundamentally, the committee's budget reflects investments in district small businesses, commercial infrastructure, and Black and brown neighborhoods in ways that are unprecedented and transformational. The committee's budget centers on 4 large themes: addressing the district's stark racial wealth gap, tackling systemic barriers to capital for small businesses, investing in neighborhoods and corridors to support an equitable recovery, and providing workforce and career pathways in critical growth industries. In the district, as we know well, the median white family's household wealth is 81 times the median household wealth of Black families. The committee's recommendations for FY 2022 budget introduced 2 transformative investments. The bill will create an annually compounding investment for each eligible child born in the District of Columbia, which is the $35 million in funding to support the Child Wealth Building Act, also known as baby bonds. As I mentioned, it will create an annually compounding investment for each eligible child born in the district. Eligibility will be based on household income determined by the federal poverty level, and the funds would be available to eligible residents upon turning 18 years of age. These baby bonds could be used to help low, moderate income residents further their education, start a business, help purchase a home, or invest early in their retirement. And it will be one of the most significant steps the council has taken to eliminate the city's stark racial and economic inequities. There's also $1.5 million in funding to support guaranteed income pilot programs. The committee's recommended subtitle, the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development Grant Making Authority for Guaranteed Income Pilot Amendment Act of 2021, authorizes DMPED to make grants to guaranteed income pilots of programs in the district. Guaranteed income is meant to supplement rather than replace the existing social safety net and serve as a tool to support racial and gender equity. The committee's budget directly addresses systemic obstacles that small women-owned and minority-owned businesses face. According to the U.S. Chamber of Commerce, Black entrepreneurs are nearly 3 times more likely than our white entrepreneurs to have their business growth and profitability stymied by the lack of financial capital. Additionally, the U.S. Federal Reserve study found that Black entrepreneurs were denied loans nearly twice as often as white business owners. 2 actions in this budget squarely address this issue. First is $10 million in a new commercial acquisition fund for equity impact enterprises. This investment in and creation of a commercial down payment assistance program will offset the increasing expense of owning and operating a small business in the district. There's $6 million in grants for local CDFIs and MDIs with a demonstrated record of lending to and supporting small businesses at rates higher than traditional banks. We saw during the pandemic, small businesses owned by people of color were less likely to access federal Paycheck Protection Program loans, which further illustrated the district's need to provide tangible and targeted support to this community. The committee's budget expands investments in small businesses in neighborhoods and commercial corridors by supporting the creation of a new Main Street in Petworth in Ward 4 and supporting small businesses in Ward 2 that would otherwise qualify for Great Streets funding. The committee commits over $1 million to these investments. The committee further invests in the district's corridors by creating 2 new roving clean teams in Ward 8 and Ward 5. Lastly, the committee allocated funds that will allow clean teams to pay existing workers a living wage. It's critical that we invest in our workers, particularly residents in communities that continue to experience double-digit unemployment rates. As a result, the committee transferred $2 million to the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development to support a new career pathways program for residents of Wards 7 and 8. This new investment will focus on 3 high-growth areas: computer science, construction, and the creative economy. The program would also recruit young people from communities east of the river. In addition to the critical investments the committee made to address racial inequities, the committee received significant investment from the Committee on Labor and Workforce. At the request of the committee, the council passed the Business Support Grants Emergency Amendment Act of 2020, which allowed the city to invest $100 million in the bridge fund to support hospitality, entertainment, and retail industries. For fiscal year 2022, the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development is transferring $30 million to the committee to support hospitality, entertainment, and retail industries, and the committee gladly accepts this transfer. The committee also accepts approximately $22 million in transfer from the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development to cover unemployment income tax exemptions. Due to the pandemic, more than 6 times as many people applied for unemployment insurance in fiscal year 2021 compared to a normal year. As a result, the district paid out almost $1.6 billion in UI benefits to individuals who used to work in the district. This transfer will be used to cover unemployment insurance taxes for tax year 2021, since the district granted a 1-year exemption for tax year 2020 due to the pandemic. The committee is pleased to accept an additional $20 million from the Committee on Labor and Workforce to support excluded workers who have lost jobs and wages due to the pandemic and have been unable to access unemployment and other safety net programs. These funds would be added to the investments in the proposed budget and would raise the total funding for excluded workers to $35 million. Finally, it's clear the downtown core faces unique challenges. Downtown DC is facing office vacancy rates above 15% And in some submarkets in the city, rates are as high as 30%. While increasing vaccine rates have buoyed our recovery, the impact of remote working on the office market remains uncertain. Prior to the pandemic, the district saw upward of 200,000 daily commuters supporting not only our office market, but also small businesses such as cafes and restaurants that serve and employ many of our hospitality workers. These businesses are significant contributors to the district's revenues, including property and sales taxes. So we must support the underlying drivers of our economy in order to fund policies and programs vital to the district. The committee appreciates some of the steps that are taken in the mayor's proposed budget through the Vitality Fund, for example. However, as we recover, it is critical that the district create a cogent, thoughtful, and comprehensive approach to business retention, attraction, and growth. We look forward to working with both members of this committee, but also the broader council and staff to support a clear-eyed approach to ensuring the district remains nimble and attractive to new and existing businesses and their workers. Again, we appreciate the transfers in to that end from the Committee on Labor and Workforce. But with this budget, the committee is also asking the committee of the whole to fund these critical investments at the level of total, including whatever we would transfer, the total level of $100 million. The fiscal year 2022 budget cycle has been incredibly challenging. And so I want to take this opportunity to see if there's any discussion by my colleagues. Councilman Pinto.
Thank you very much, Chairman McDuffie, for all of your and your team's extremely hard work on this committee's FY 2022 budget recommendations. There are many investments in the committee's recommendations that I am very grateful to see, and that will help ensure our city is able to make a strong and equitable recovery. Thank you very much for incorporating the expansion of Great Streets for Ward 2 businesses. This is a crucial investment in our city's recovery. The Great Streets grants will provide much needed support to our Ward 2 commercial corridors, particularly those that have struggled during the pandemic, and will encourage new small businesses to locate to these areas and throughout our city. I am pleased to see a substantial investment to provide direct rent relief for small businesses and relief for our hotels and restaurants that have struggled throughout the pandemic. The exemption of UI benefits from taxes are also an extremely important step in helping our residents recover. We know that so many of our residents rely on these businesses for their and their families' livelihoods. The Great Streets grants and the Bridge Fund relief will help not only sustain our current labor force, but will create new jobs for our residents. I'm very grateful for the additional support for our DuPont Circle and Glover Park clean teams. As we all know, our clean teams play a critical role in ensuring that our city is vibrant and welcoming for our residents, workers, and businesses. The committee's additional investment is a testament to the tremendous work that these teams do and continue to do, and I want to express my sincere gratitude to all of these workers. I am very appreciative of the financial relief for Capitol Crossing to help them alleviate their debt, and I appreciate the committee's attention to detail on the technical adjustments that were needed for this property. The investments in guaranteed basic income and baby bonds have the potential to be truly transformational to the next generation in our quest to reduce the grave income disparities that we continue to see in our city, and I want to commend you, Chairman McDuffie, for your leadership and innovation in these areas. Finally, I want to thank you for making additional investments to support our excluded workers for a total investment of $30 million. So many of our residents have been systematically excluded from the relief offered throughout the COVID emergency, and this investment is critical and a great start, but I am committed to working with my colleagues to ensure that we can find additional resources to support these individuals and families, many of whom only received $1,000 over the course of the entire year last year. While I am deeply appreciative for many of the investments made, I will continue to work with you all as we move to the Committee of the Whole. I think we need to find additional resources to support our Golden Triangle bid. The Innovation District funds are critical for recovery for our downtown and ensuring that DC is competitive in retaining and attracting new business in the years to come. I'm disappointed to see a reduction in this funding, which we know is so needed this year, and we'll be working to try to identify additional funding to focus this recovery. We'll also be working to find more funding for the back payment of rent for our small businesses and more relief for our hotels and workers. These crucial investments will pay dividends in tax revenue to fund important programs across our city. So again, thank you so much, Chairman McDuffie, for your and your team's huge effort, and I look forward to supporting these recommendations today.
Thank you, Councilman Pinto. I should have formally moved the report. So let me just say, I'm going to move the committee report with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. Opening it back up to discussion, I'm going to turn next to Councilmember Shea, followed by Councilmember Allen.
Thank you very much, Councilperson McDuffie. And like my colleagues, we know what it's like to chair a committee, especially one with such important agencies under its purview. So thank you for your hard work and your staff's hard work on this budget and the report. The committee has oversight over many areas responsible to support the district's business community, small businesses, economic development, and banking activities, and oversight of vital industries, including parking and private for-hire vehicles, the utility industry, the alcohol beverage regulation. During the public health crisis, which was a health crisis to be sure, but it's also, as you noted, an economic crisis. And it's key that we continue investments in our small local business community and help them dig out of this economic collapse brought by COVID-19. I support the investments the committee budget is making in all of the many important programs that you mentioned. And I will be supporting the budget recommendations today. I would just like to take a moment to make note of a few items from the committee's budget that I'm particularly keen about. And before that, I want to make note of one specific item. My committee on Transportation and the Environment has made a number of transfers to your committee. However, there's one additional committee transfer that we want to send to you that hasn't been accounted for in your draft report. It's a transfer of $300,000 in one-time money to DSLBD for the creation of the Friendship Heights Alliance. We were not able to identify precisely where the money needed to go before your staff completed work on the draft that we're taking up now. We thought it was going to the Office of Planning and had alerted the COW, but learned too late that it actually needed to go to DSLBD. But now that we know, I hope that you will accept it now and it can be incorporated in the council-wide approach to the budget by the budget office. So making a note of that. And sorry about the last minute addition. In any case, overall, I'm very pleased to be able to transfer funds from my committee to expand the district's Main Street program at DSLBD, district's clean teams, and fund a downtown bid pedestrian study. In that vein, I'm very pleased to see your continued commitment to the clean team program with not just adding clean teams, but also continuing investments to make sure that clean team members are paid a living wage. These groups do a wonderful job in our city, but on top of that, we get the added benefit of providing jobs to our district residents, now at a living wage guaranteed, and often to those otherwise having difficulty finding employment. And I want to commend you for your steadfast commitment to racial equity in this budget, as well as previous budgets. In particular, I support this committee's transfer to the Committee on Labor and Workforce Development to create a new career pathway program for youth and young adults of Wards 7 and 8 that focus on computer science, construction, and the creative economy. I also want to note my support for the COVID-19 relief efforts that were funded both by the mayor and your committee, my committee within the deputy mayor for planning and economic development to assist retail, hospitality, tourism, entertainment industries, food access, DC bid tourism recovery, Destination DC, and the Arts Venue Bridge Fund, among others. And for the many, many other highlights and provisions in this budget that you've gone over at the outset. So thank you very much, Councilmember McDuffie. And as I mentioned, I will certainly and happily be supporting this report and budget today.
Thank you, Councilmember Shea. And we are aware of the $300,000 transfer, and we are obviously, without objection from any members of the committee, want to work with you to accept that.
Thank you.
Turning next to Councilmember Charles Allen.
Thank you, Councillor McDuffie. It's been said before, but let me offer my thanks as well to you and your staff. I think we know how hard all this work has been, both with a budget cycle that has been delayed and compressed at the same time. So I appreciate the hard work that's gone into this. I think that in particular, as I've also heard my colleagues talk about, the work that you and your team have done to really help focus the council on racial equity is appreciated, and then the work within this budget to make some very significant real investments that are necessary to help close the racial wealth gap that exists in the district. And I appreciate the work that's gone into this. Notably, as I think has already been talked about, but I will say it again, I am especially excited to see the committee funding innovative pilot programs. What we have been doing for decades clearly has not been enough to ensure that our Black and Latinx residents in the district have the same opportunities as white residents. That's been borne out and shown bare for everyone to see with the impact of this pandemic and the economic recession that came with it. The baby bonds and guaranteed income, they're ideas that we need to be trying. We need to be looking at these ideas. And then of course, if they work, we need to expand them. But I think that the investments that are being made here are deeply meaningful, and really appreciate that this is an area where you've put some focus and then obviously now put the dollars behind that. We've seen some of these pilots already working. I can think, for example, with the Thrive partnership with Martha's Table, Bread for the City, the 11th Street Bridge, Far Southeast Family Strengthening Collaborative. These are demonstrated successes, and I think that your pilot will help build on that. So I'm really glad to see that. One item that I would note, I think that it seems like maybe this committee is deferring to the Housing Committee on the Mayor's Low-Income Housing Tax Credit subtitle. I'm not on that committee, so I didn't have a chance to speak to that yesterday, but I just want to note, I do continue to want to look at the subtitle as we consider in the BSA once we move to the full committee of the whole. As you know, I worked last year to finally take advantage of this affordable housing funding mechanism that actually you yourself, Councilor McDuffie, helped create several years ago, and that executives just never used. I think that some of the advocates have been meeting with DHCD about the subtitle, which would once again give the mayor discretion as to whether to utilize this tool for affordable housing development or not. So I want to just flag that I want to monitor that closely as we move through the full committee of the whole. And if you'd like, Mr. McDuffie, certainly work with you, include you in that effort as we move forward. There is one item though that I did want to note and I guess ask about. I will say that I am disappointed that there appears to be $2 million being cut from a bid in Ward 6, the Southwest bid, and as a member of the committee, seeing it for the first time in the committee report was frustrating. So I don't know why the $2 million in funding was cut from the Southwest bid, and I guess Mr. McDuffie, if you could help explain why we're reducing the Southwest bid's funding, I'd appreciate that.
Sure, we're reducing the Southwest bids funding as well as the funding that was in the budget for the other bids to fund some of the other committee priorities that we have. Obviously, I know you know as the committee chair, trying to identify funds within the budget to fund overarching priorities is a really tough challenge. But we did reduce the funds. There was approximately $14 million in the budget for these various things, which didn't touch on every bid. It touched on certain bids. But we thought we left sufficient funding in the budget for each of the bids to be able to do the work that has been articulated by the Deputy Mayor's office.
Okay. I'll just say as a member of this committee, to have that reduction in a bid in my ward and not even having a discussion about it or hearing about it is frustrating because I think we do have a lot of shared priorities. So I'm disappointed to see that. And once we move to the full council, I would like to try to see how those can be restored, because that came as a shock to the communities that have been working on this, and it came as a shock to me as a member of the committee that this cut would be here. But otherwise, there's a lot of great work that is happening in this committee budget, and I'm looking forward to support this. But I do need to flag that as a concern and troubling item. But other than that, we'll be very excited with the work that's been put forward in this, and look forward to supporting this today. Thank you, Mr. McDuffie.
And thank you, Councilmember Allen. Councilmember Gray. You're muted, Councilmember Gray.
Do that all the time. Am I unmuted now, Mr. Chairman?
You are unmuted. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to first and foremost thank you and your staff for the amazing level of work that was done and the efforts that have been put forth in this budget season, which has been interestingly compressed in some ways. It's very different than we've ever experienced before. And I want to thank you and your staff for composing the budget recommendations that we have before us, for your committee today. I also want to thank the public too for their input these past several weeks on the proposed budget, which invariably will help us make decisions moving ahead. To highlight a few initiatives, I appreciate the maintenance, the investment in new grocery stores and the food access funds that are involved in those efforts, as well as the restaurants in Ward 7. As you know, Mr. Chairman, Ward 7 clearly is a food desert, and I appreciate the mayor's efforts. I appreciate your efforts in being able to move forward and making some inroads in the issues that are affected there. Those are frankly key tools in our efforts to be able to help small businesses, in some cases not so small businesses, some of the hardest hit by the pandemic in the city. I also support the investment by your committee, this committee, in the Career Pathways program for residents, especially Ward 7 and of course of Ward 8 as well. This budget gives us an unprecedented opportunity to make the most vulnerable populations within the District of Columbia feel heard and supported. And we should make this opportunity to do that, especially in light of the pandemic that we've experienced. With that said, I do have a few concerns that I want to express, and they basically deal with the recommendations that you've advanced in the committee report. I think this involves expanding the DC's opportunity accounts to approximately 600 people each year. Continuing a 4-to-1 match, I think it is up to $6,000. Opportunity accounts can be used for college, continuing education, job training, first-time home purchases, small business development, qualifying medical emergencies, or to leverage the cost of retirement. All of this, of course, you know, Mr. Chairman. These accounts can advance equity by bolstering economic ability and opportunity in challenged communities that struggle. In this current pandemic environment, when jobs, livelihoods, financial well-being, retirements, and lives have been lost, every bit helps, Mr. Chairman, as you know. The committee partially reverses the mayor's enhancement of opportunity accounts by reducing the amount by $2.75 million a year. Maybe you can help me understand the rationale for the reduction, and I'm sure you have one, so I'm looking forward to hearing that. Can you tell us what the expected impact is on financially strapped families who otherwise would have benefited from this program? The proposed budget for the Office of the Deputy Mayor for DMPED makes a $6.9 million enhancement in fiscal year 22 for a technical assistance hub from ARPA municipal funds. This small business coaching and technical assistance hub has intended to better assist local businesses in marketing, visual merchandising, inventory management, and accounting and strategic planning for growth. The intent was to demystify the TA process, technical assistance process, increase TA's access for underserved businesses, and improve the overall effectiveness for businesses navigating these supports. However, the committee recommended a full reversal, I think, Mr. Chairman, and a sweep of these. So perhaps you can tell me what the rationale is when you get to that for and justification for this complete sweep. Our small, underserved businesses no longer in need of technical assistance, which I think they are, especially where I live in Ward 7 and the work we're trying to do there. And the assistance in being able to get through this economic challenge and the pandemic that we've experienced. Similarly, the proposed budget for the Office of the Deputy Mayor for Planning and Economic Development makes a $10 million enhancement in fiscal year 22 for the Vitality closing fund from ARPA local revenue replacements. So the committee recommends a partial reversal and sweep of $2.5 million from the mayor's proposed $10 million. The purpose of the Employment Center Vitality and Local Jobs Creation Fund was to provide discretionary grants to attract local transformative anchors within excuse me, Mr. Chairman, anchors within priority sectors and growing companies that can accelerate the ecosystem. I just offer these comments, Mr. Chairman, just ask just a few questions that I put forward to you, and would appreciate any comments you would want to make on the rationale for some of those changes. So again, Mr. Chairman, I want to thank you for working with us to be able to address the food deserts that we have in Ward 7 and the work that we are doing now and you are doing through this committee to be able to change outcomes for people in Ward 7. So thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, for the work that you've done. And I appreciate working to try to support this budget.
Thank you, Mr. Gray. You asked a few questions, so I'm going to try to answer them briefly before we call for a vote. With respect to the opportunity accounts, the funds were cut, but I want to recognize, perhaps members may not remember, but there was an initial budget of $450,000 for this purpose. So bear that in mind. That this is the amount that they were working with to do this program. We increased that amount by to about 1.2 or so just last month via legislation passed by the council, which essentially doubled the number of people assisted for FY21. And so when you look at the cuts, you should bear in mind that the amount that we have included keeps this budget essentially stable for where it is this year. And it affords the, I think it's DISB that administers this program. They'll get the continuing support for returning citizens and others through that investment that we're adding for this budget for FY 2022. So there was only $450,000 for this program to begin with. They recently increased it, and we're going to continue that level into FY 2022. The TA program you mentioned was cut. There are other agencies that already perform technical assistance, and they already have funding to perform technical assistance. We're trying to make sure that as we look at this budget, Mr. Gray, as I know is a priority for you, that we're actually getting dollars out to people to support their entrepreneurship and to support their ability to recover from the pandemic. Technical assistance is important, and we work with various agencies to do that. We have funded through this budget funding for CDFIs, our community development financial institutions, many of which are the ones that people draw on when they need the finances to continue their businesses, as well as minority depository institutions as well. And so we think that we have a budget that balances the need for technical assistance with the desire of businesses and entrepreneurs for capital, for grant funds to support them right now, today, so that they can make it throughout this pandemic and into recovery. So I wanted to note that. I think it's something that you'll find is of interest to many of the entrepreneurs that are in Ward 7 and other parts of the city. We also have the Equity Impact Fund, which would allow for TA as well. So there's $2 million in FY 2020 for that purpose. So there are different pockets where the technical assistance is going to be funded, but we did think that there were other priorities that you all would support, given what small businesses have been asking for and the disproportionate impact of small businesses on women-owned, minority-owned entrepreneurs in the city. And just, I think you mentioned the Vitality Fund too.
Yep.
I've had some conversations with a number of people who've had interest in that. And while I mentioned in my statement that we appreciate that proposal as a first step, what we really need, this committee and the people throughout the District of Columbia who want to see the vitality injected into our economy, is for DMPID and the district to create a more cogent, thoughtful, and comprehensive approach to business retention, attraction, and growth. And heretofore, we've had some fits and starts with respect to QHTC and other programs. I know a number of members during the oversight hearing asked about the Vitality Fund, which was a little confusing because initially it's referred to as a closing fund. And there's been some struggle to really articulate the purpose of the fund. Now, I will tell you, we have subsequently had some really solid conversations with people in the business community, which I think further clarified how this might be used. And so if this remains of interest to you in terms of the funding, I'm happy to talk with you about it, Councilman McGregor, after today's markup. I think it's a very important fund. I think regional competitiveness is something that we have to approach with very clear eyes. It's one of the reasons why I sent the mayor a letter asking her to reopen the District of Columbia before she did, and I actually joined Councilmember Pinto in sending the mayor a letter as well, asking her to reopen the city because we were seeing other jurisdictions reopen around us. So this committee, with all of the members here today, has been really supportive of our business community and really pushing to make sure that we are mindful of regional competitiveness. And I think this budget really supports that and furthers the desire of our district small businesses to have us invest in them and not have them be at any competitive disadvantage because of our policies and some of our programs. And so there's a Vitality Fund, but there are also other areas where we think we're really doing things consistent with that purpose. Okay.
Okay, well, I appreciate that. And you realize the challenges that we face, Mr. Chairman, in Ward 7, especially. And we're looking to your assistance to be able to help us continue to work our way through those challenges that we have.
I appreciate that, Mr. Gray, and I appreciate all the statements of my colleagues. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. I move the committee report with leave for staff to make technical and conforming changes. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed, the ayes have it unanimously. As I mentioned earlier, I started to allude to it, this budget cycle has been incredibly challenging because of this pandemic. And this committee has been supported mightily by both the committee staff as well as all the other council support staffs. And so if you all bear with me, I want to say a few thank yous before we gavel. I'd like to thank Kay Westcott from the council's Office of the General Counsel, as well as her colleagues in the Office of the General Counsel. I want to thank the Secretary's Office and all the folks who supported our hearings and meetings over this budget process. I want to thank Jim Budolf, Susanna Groves, who have been just really spectacular in their support of the committee and our work on this budget process. And of course, my staff who worked incredibly hard through this budget season. My Chief of Staff, Marisa Flowers, Committee Director, Alicia DeFazio, Senior Legal Counsel, Brett Allen, Senior Legislative Counsel, Argo Agui, Legislative Counsel, Sandra Kopinski, and Legislative Analyst, Austin Neville. So again, thank you all for your incredible work this budget season. Thank you to the members of this committee for your input through this budget process. I and my staff look forward to continue to work with you all, as well as our other colleagues, in moving this budget forward. This marks the end of this additional meeting of the committee. The time is now 12:14 p.m. and this meeting is adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.